When the police found Allison, she'd already starved to death, about 6 feet from a fridge full of fresh food. Stranger still, she was crawling out of the kitchen when she collapsed, succumbing to the toll that weeks without a meal had taken on her body. Why didn't she just grab a bite to eat? Now, her house is an ant's nest of CSI technicians and beat cops. There's no sign of forced entry, but in a small town like this, mysterious deaths are big news, and the town has never seen a death more mysterious than this. As crime scene photographers, unsure of whether this even counts as a crime scene, take photos of the body and the surrounding rooms, a deputy prattles off Allison's medical history. No sign of mental illness on her record or treatment for eating disorders in particular. No GI disorders, no history of drug use. The detective, standing in the middle of the shifting crowd, just stares down at Allison's body. She's horrifically thin, every bone visible underneath her pulled tight gray skin. There's a fly crawling across her eyeball already. Nothing about this seems to add up. "Do you think she was starved somewhere else and then dumped here?" the deputy asks. The detective shrugs. "Seems like a lot of trouble to go through. If someone did kill her like that, they must have really hated her guts." Their musings are interrupted by someone laughing, not exactly the most tactful behavior within earshot of a corpse. The detective turns and sees that it's one of the beat cops, standing next to the fridge and looking closer at the piece of paper stuck on the upper freezer compartment. You could say it's art, by some juvenile definition. A water-damaged piece of mixed media, felt tip and ballpoint pen, depicting some mountains, a house, a well, a dog, a smiling sun in the background, and a man dressed like a chef. Whoever drew it wouldn't have been any older than 10. The detective shakes his head. "Show some respect, man." The beat cop tries to stifle his laughter and points at the drawing. "Sorry, boss, I was just admiring little Rembrandt's work over here." That gets a laugh out of some of the CSI techs dusting the kitchen counter. They'd already started feeling like coming out here was a waste of time. Clearly, what they're looking at is just some tragic accident, not something that requires a thorough investigation. One of them plucks up enough courage to say, "Maybe the crime we should be investigating here is who stole that piece from the Louvre." More laughter from everyone but the detective, who seemingly takes his job a hell of a lot more seriously than all of his colleagues. After all, starving to death is a horrible way to go. In the following hours, things move fast, but the detective finds that his eyes keep wandering back to the refrigerator drawing. The coroners arrive and cart away Allison's body for an autopsy. Crime scene photographers capture every room in the house. The beat cops and the CSI techs all file out and clock off. It isn't long before all that's left is the detective and the deputy. "You want my read, boss?" the deputy says, zipping up his coat. "She just snapped. Life's stressful, you know? Can make people do crazy things. She must have just, decided to stop eating. Let nature take its course." The detective is percolating on a strange idea himself. "Does she have any kids?" The deputy shakes his head. If she did, they would have been home by now. "Nieces? Nephews?" "Only child, according to my research, boss." The detective narrows his eyes at the fridge. "Then who drew that?" he asks. And the deputy doesn't have an answer. With gloved hands, he carefully peels the drawing off of the fridge, folds it, and slides it into an evidence bag. They've found out all they can for one day, and there are still so many horrible things to discover. Later that night, after hours stuck in traffic, the beat cop arrives home to his one-bedroom apartment. He's excited to get back to his real place when Sandra comes to her senses again and lets him back in. Sure, he slept around a little. Sure, he drank a little too much sometimes. But what can you expect? The beat's a stressful job. A man needs his releases. He heads inside and closes the door behind him, chuckling to himself about that Rembrandt zinger from earlier. "Great work, Arnie," he thinks. "Funny and cultured. Is there anything you can't do?" But the glow doesn't stick around for long. He's alone in the apartment, he thinks. It's strange. He's always thought of himself as the courageous type, but every shadowed corner, every open doorway, seems to portend some dark mystery. Is there someone in his apartment, waiting for him? The beat cop isn't the type to take chances. He's been known to be a little jumpy on the job. That had gotten him a slap on the wrist before, but it doesn't stop him drawing his service weapon and sweeping from room to room, all three of them, checking for intruders. "I'm an armed police officer," he says aloud. "If anybody's in here, this is your one chance to give yourself up. I will use lethal force." Nothing. Just empty rooms. Why is he so paranoid tonight? Must be getting sick or something. Could be all that job stress again. He decides to go to bed without dinner, maybe have a lay-in the next morning, until the grumbling of his stomach wakes him up in the middle of the night and drags him out into the kitchen. The beat cop still brings his service weapon with him, even in his sleep shirt and boxers. He still can't shake that feeling that something is wrong in his apartment tonight. And in a way, he's right. Just not the way he thinks. He checks the fridge. No groceries, of course. He hasn't settled in that much yet, but he does still have half a hoagie wrapped in aluminum foil, perfect for a late-night snack. But as he takes a bite of the cold, leftover sandwich, he feels a terrible pain shoot through his abdomen, like a blade lancing straight into his back. The beat cop lets out a terrible scream as his kitchen's tiled floor leaps up to meet him. But the detective won't find out what happened to the beat cop for a few days. He's still on the case of Allison's mysterious death, and that's what brings him to the coroner's office to see the results of the unfortunate woman's autopsy. Allison's laid out across the slab, a thin sheet, at least letting her maintain some kind of dignity in death. The coroner is closely studying his clipboard. "Terrible way to die, starvation," he says. "She hadn't eaten in 3 whole weeks. Used up her glycogen reserves, then her body started eating into its own muscles. Nausea, vomiting, decreased brain function and immune system. Seems like a heart attack is what actually did her in, after all the stress she put her body through." The detective, who'd seen some of the most awful things one person can do to another, still has to suppress a shudder at the thought. How could a person possibly let themselves die like that? "Anything that would indicate she was kidnapped and being held against her will, Doc?" the detective asks. "Defensive wounds, bruises, ligature marks?" The coroner shakes his head. "Nope, nothing like that," he says. "There was something a little strange, though. Her liver seemed almost like it was missing a piece, like it was surgically extracted. Same with her gallbladder, but that's not consistent with her medical history, and I didn't find any surgical scars on her body either. Now that is strange." The detective makes a note of it immediately, thanks the coroner, and starts to leave when he stopped once more on the way out. "Oh, detective, I almost forgot," the coroner says. "She had some torn paper underneath her nails. Couldn't quite make out what it was, though. The particulates were too small." The detective makes a note of that, too. All these pieces falling onto the board, but how do any of them fit together? He doesn't know that yet. Back at the station, things are equally chaotic. A number of people have called in sick with various ailments, so the detective needs to pull double duty fixing up other people's work. But as he's cataloging evidence and filing paperwork, he's still filing all the details away in his head. Nothing indicating that someone else had done this to her. Strange damage to some of her internal organs, paper underneath her fingernails. And still, beyond it all, a woman starved to death next to a fridge full of food, crawling away from it at the very moment of her death, rather than going for the sustenance that would have saved her. With so much that's strange and disturbing about this case, why can't he stop thinking about the drawing on the fridge? The one that had no earthly reason to be there. Meanwhile, across town, a woman is bringing home a car full of groceries. Her hubby, a certain CSI tech, had to call in sick today. He had the most terrible pain in his abdomen. Must be how hard he works, she figured. Stress ulcers, maybe? That's why she just left him home to eat snacks and watch TV while she ran the household errands. But she has no idea what's waiting for her when she gets back home. She's walking across the threshold with her arms filled with big brown shopping bags when she hears the groaning coming from the living room. Pained and guttural, but also oddly hollow, like the noise a wounded animal might make. She heads in to investigate, seeing her CSI husband sprawled across the couch and screams in horror. The grocery bags hit the floor and spill out everywhere. He's staring up at the ceiling, groaning through an empty mouth. His tongue is gone, disappeared. Just a vacant black tunnel all the way down his throat. The same could be said for his eyes, replaced by 2 empty black sockets. Meanwhile, the detective is following up on a lead. He arrives at the house of Allison's mother. Apparently they were close, and from the redness of her eyes, he can tell that she's still grieving for her daughter's terrible death. They sit at the mother's kitchen table over cups of coffee. She explains that none of this makes sense to her. Her daughter had only just moved into the home and she seemed so happy. Allison had just gotten out of a bad relationship and was excited to be getting her own place with a new sense of independence. She'd only just had the new fridge installed. The detective stops her there. Allison had mentioned the fridge specifically? Her mother gives a tearful nod.
She found it on Facebook Marketplace,
she said.
It had the exact kind of retro vibe she was looking for, Crosley Shelvador. They're actually very rare these days.
It's all starting to connect. Everything is fine. Allison is happy. Then she buys a new fridge, and she's dead from starvation under mysterious circumstances within 3 weeks? That fridge. He knows it has something to do with this, and if he wants any answers, he has to go back and take a closer look. The detective arrives back at Allison's home as the sun is setting and darkness is creeping in. He walks in alone and makes a beeline for the kitchen where the fridge is waiting. And strangely, he sees that the drawing he saw his deputy peel off of that fridge with his own 2 eyes, is still there, fixed to the upper compartment. Something's wrong here, and it really doesn't take a detective to figure that much out. Nursing a sense of deep, gnawing unease, he approaches the fridge and opens the door, not sure what to expect on the other side. But the one thing he wasn't anticipating was 4 different brown paper bags, stacked neatly in the otherwise empty fridge. Each one has the name Eric scrawled onto them with a black marker in the exact same handwriting. The detective knows better than to touch any of them, of course. He calls for backup immediately, and it isn't long before the paper bags are being studied at a nearby forensic lab affiliated with the station. The contents of each bag, which a lab tech slowly empties out in front of him, is pretty much exactly the same. A Ziploc bag containing 3 chocolate chip cookies, a note that reads, "Be a good boy today," written in the exact same handwriting as the Eric written on each bag's exterior, a white bread sandwich with the crusts cut off and a strange mix of flesh and viscera inside, and another Ziploc bag, filled with more miscellaneous meat and viscera. Naturally, they conduct DNA tests on the meat inside the sandwiches, and it doesn't take long to determine that the meat in question is human. More specific DNA testing would reveal that the meat came from the beat cop, the CSI tech, and the unfortunate deputy who'd removed the drawing from the fridge for the first time under the detective's orders. By now, all 3 of them are dead. They just haven't been discovered yet. And they won't be, at least not by our detective, who's gotten so admirably close to figuring the whole thing out. His investigation will soon be taken from him by men claiming to be FBI, who will ask him about everyone who has a working knowledge of the case. Then, the detective and everyone he named will have their memories wiped. Because the unfortunate death of Allison and all the others are now just footnotes in the SCP Foundation file for SCP-683, Refrigerator Art. After everything you just heard, it's only natural for you to have questions, and I can promise I'll have answers for at least some of them. Why did all those people die? And why did Allison starve while all the others had their flesh and organs stolen for those macabre sack lunches? The truth is, they all had one thing in common. They either attempted to remove or verbalized an insulting thought towards the drawing on the anomalous SCP-683 refrigerator. Doing either of these things will immediately activate the primary effect of the frightening fridge. The next time you try to eat, every bite you take will instantaneously result in an equal amount of body mass being removed by unknown means. The process is extremely painful when it happens, but the parts you'll lose won't kill you until you've met the threshold of losing exactly 0.42 kilograms of flesh, organs, or even skin. Then you're definitely dead, and it will be slow and agonizing. To the best of our knowledge, once the process is initiated, there's actually no way to stop it. Well, there's no way to stop it and live anyway, because the only way you can buy yourself more time is simply choosing not to eat. That's the option that poor Allison chose after experiencing the excruciating pain of her first couple of bites. She lived a couple weeks longer than most people who fall victim to SCP-683, but given that she spent those weeks slowly starving to death while becoming increasingly aware that her new retro fridge has murdered her, it's really in the eye of the beholder whether that's a better way to go. You may have already gathered what will happen to your missing viscera if you choose not to starve to death. The meat is transposed into the mysterious sack lunches, packed into sandwiches with the remainder inside a Ziploc bag, a nutritious lunch for the Eric all the bags are addressed to. The same Eric that the Foundation currently believes also drew the picture that acts as the vector for the dangerous anomalous effects of SCP-683. Also, in case you were wondering, the 3 chocolate chip cookies are completely non-anomalous, so at least there's that as a consolation prize. Through extensive D-Class testing, which has resulted in a lot of deaths and an equal number of sack lunches manifesting in the refrigerator, the Foundation has at least discovered some interesting details about the mechanisms by which this strange and frightening anomaly works. For one, burning the art doesn't seem to activate the effects of the anomaly, though like with removing the drawing manually, it always reappeared back on the fridge within 68 hours of first being removed, even when destroyed. Because of the human body's natural inclination against self-destruction, many of the D-classes used in these tests have refused to eat food for the purposes of testing, opting instead for the starvation route, though this in itself has given the Foundation some interesting avenues for testing. When the subjects passed out, they were intubated and fed intravenously. By doing this, the Foundation found that this causes flesh to disappear just like consuming solid food does. In the end, Eric needs to get his morbid lunch one way or another. At this point, the mysterious Eric is considered a person of interest by the SCP Foundation, if he is indeed just one person. Rather unnervingly, the Foundation knows almost nothing about this enigmatic figure, aside from the fact that he's already associated with 2 other anomalies: SCP-066, also known as Eric's Toy, and SCP-168, also known as the Sentient Calculator. And while SCP-168 has remained harmless, if admittedly a little sassy, SCP-066 has shown serious potential for danger when provoked. 066 was originally a harmless ball of yarn that responded in a number of polymorphic ways to different audio stimuli, such as music, but after a Foundation experiment that involved cutting away a piece of its yarn, it became actively violent towards anyone who approached it. This appears to be a running theme with many of the anomalies associated with Eric. They can appear harmless, even whimsical, but if you make the mistake of attacking, or in the case of SCP-683, even belittling them, there will be hell to pay for your indiscretions. Because of the potential danger that can befall people for even daring to make a negative comment about the illustration on the refrigerator, it's been given the EUCLID Containment Class, reserved for anomalies that react unpredictably in a containment scenario. It's kept in a standard issue 8x8x5 meter containment chamber at Research Bay Zingiber 4 in Site 19, perpetually attached to a gas-powered generator to keep the refrigerator itself running. The fridge is also covered in a large, opaque drop cloth, with the intention of stopping anyone from accidentally removing the drawing during tests and incurring the deadly consequences as a result. The chamber around the fridge is reinforced with a steel door with reinforced hinges and an SCP keycard access system with a manual override. Because of the risk that even potentially seeing the art, and thus being able to comment on it, poses, there are no windows into the cell. The security cameras focus only on the exterior door, and security guards need to be at level 3 or above in clearance. No food or drink is permitted within 20 meters of the containment chamber. You really just can't take any chances with this cursed refrigerator where E. coli is the least of your worries. In our internet age, it's easier than ever before to toss around comments and critiques at everything in sight. Just check the comments under this video if you need any examples. But the dangers presented by SCP-683 remind us to think a little before we speak our mind at a work of art. After all, you never know when the art's listening. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-1550, Dr. Wondertainment's Custom Pets, Top 12 SCP Animals compilation,